This podcast is brought to you by Gamer Nation Productions. Gamer Nation, the new gaming podcast network. By gamers, for gamers. Roll with us.
This is episode number 80 of the Confessions of an Arcade Addict podcast. Okay, since I recorded and posted episode 79, basically I had a long stretch of days where I had to work, 19 of them as a matter of fact. This is now Friday evening, January 24th, and this is the first day off I've had in almost 3 weeks. So, I basically had to put my head down and just focus on work and, doing my work correctly, which is also, my main gig at the hospital, my Saturdays at the arcade, and I worked a Sunday last week to cover a shift for a coworker, and, the home care stuff. And, of course, helping taking care of and looking after my son, all that fun stuff. So yeah, all that, combined to make Brian a tired person, and not only that, I am fighting like serious bouts of insomnia. So yeah, quality rest is at a premium right now, but I made it through, and, not much more to say about that. Let's see, what else been going on? As I said in the preamble, those who were listening live on Twitch, the big news for me is that Marvel Heroes is back. There is a website. Matter of fact, I'm going to pull it up on my browser. It is mhtahiti.com. And they have a Project Tahiti Marvel Heroes server. And what that is if you have it or have had it on Steam, basically all you have to do is load the game in, start it up, and select the Tahiti server, and on the website they walk you through the whole process. And it requires one extra step that they don't mention for obvious reasons, but you can pretty much figure it out easily. I certainly did. And so I've been playing Marvel Heroes for like the last 3 days after I figured out exactly how to play, or not play the game, but actually how to get the game to work. And yeah, I mean, anyone who knows me knows that I considered this game to be one of the best MMOs of all time. But yeah, I'm looking at, the thing here, the main page even has a status where the servers are up and there are 56 players online, which is cool. What clued me into this is that one of the people I have followed and supported on Twitch for, oh goodness, I want to say 10, maybe even 11 years now. His name is Rushlock. I found him through another streamer that I followed for even longer by the name of Buana. And that's how I found Marvel Heroes. And I immediately downloaded it. It was free to play, but yeah, it was also, I hate to say it, but yeah, it was pay to win. And because all the good heroes and the good equipment were behind a paywall. And I shudder to think how much money I spent on that game. It was a lot, just to keep it 100. It was a lot of money over those years. And no one was sadder than me when they closed the servers down. And yeah, I was very unhappy. And it's like every Marvel game that has come out since Marvel Heroes was in existence, all it did was just trigger, a wave of sadness because, yeah, I missed Marvel Heroes. So when I fired up Twitch to, see what my favorite streamers were up to, and I saw Rushlock was on, and I saw the Marvel Heroes game underneath his handle, and I'm like, there is no way. There is just no way this is going on. So I immediately tune in, and sure enough, he's playing Marvel Heroes. Sure enough. And he's having a good old time, and I'm like, are my eyes deceiving me right now? And he's like, yeah, this is Marvel Heroes. I'm like, okay, how? Who? Where? What? all of those, and he told me, it's like, okay, go over here. And for those who are watching me on Twitch right now, I'm just looking at, I'm looking at the mhtahiti.com website, which gives you the options. If you have it in Steam, they give you an option there. And, you can either use the Tahiti Connection tool or Tahiti Bifrost. I used Bifrost. And basically, once I got it going, it's all good. So, yeah, I'm very happy about that. Let's see. Video game wise, not too much going on aside from the usual thing. I was able to get like an hour in last Saturday. I didn't do. I was trying. I've been trying for a while to get 100,000 on asteroids, and I keep falling short. Last Saturday, I put up a score of, what was it? Or was it no, it was the Saturday before, so it was 2 weeks ago. I put up a score of 85,000. And, I know if I used the one asteroid trick, I could get 100,000 easy, but I consider that cheating, and I'm sorry. And I know there are people out there are a couple of guys I see who stream infrequently on Twitch. I forget their names, or otherwise I'd shout them out. But, we talked about that while they were playing, oh goodness, now I forgot the name of it. It's basically the second sequel to Asteroids, and I cannot remember the name of it. But it came out right after Asteroids Deluxe. And you know what? Let me just look it up on Wikipedia really quick, because I just can't remember it. Let's see. Oh, no, I don't need that. There it is, video game. And let's see, it gives what's the sequels? I know the sequel, but yeah, I cannot. Space Duel, that's it. I couldn't remember the name of it. But yeah, they were playing Space Duel, and I think they have like the world record for tandem play where the two ships are attached in Space Duel. So yeah, and of course they were talking about it, and basically all they do when they play asteroids to break records is they leave one small asteroid, slow moving preferably, and they just fly up at maximum thrust. They fly up, fly vertically on the screen. When the saucers come out, they basically just turn and shoot them en passant, and that's how they get their points. But I'm a little bit of a masochist, I guess. I play the game straight up. I really do. And, it's just one of those things where that's just how I just do things, And I'm just like, that's just how I want to do it. If I want to achieve something with a game, I want to play it straight up and not resort to, marathon tactics or, anything like that. Like when I eclipsed my all-time high score on Time Pilot a couple months back. I played it straight up. I didn't try to do tricks. I didn't point press. I did none of it. I just played it the way I always played it. And that's just how I feel about it, I'd rather make an achievement playing it straight up than trying to resort to tricks and so forth. So yeah, that's pretty much what's been going on. As I've said, as a matter of fact, I think I said it in episode 79, the Gamer Nation Productions Discord server is live. People are joining it in dribs and drabs, and we're having decent conversations, which is good because that's what I want. I run that, and I would like a couple of moderators, especially those who are experienced in moderating on Discord, to moderate the server. Both podcasts are there. Fate Goes Hammer and Confessions, of course, are there. And I'll put a new invite link in the show description when this episode goes live. So there it is. Let's see. So yeah, I've checked emails and voicemails and nothing's out there. So once again, if you've got questions, comments, thoughts, opinions, as long as you are civil about it, because God only knows civility is taken a turn for the worse over this last week, and it's probably only going to get worse over the next 4 years, and that's all I will say. By all means, hit me up, arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com. Also, there is a phone number for voicemails, and that number is area code 734-623-0832. And if you're calling for confessions, make sure to state that when you leave the message. Let's see, I am on most social media platforms. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Threads, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok now that it's back. I am on Blue Sky, I'm on Tumblr. And all those links are on Linktree. And the address to that is linktr.ee/arcadeaddictbrian. That gives you all of the ways you can get a hold of the show in one convenient screen. So yeah, if you want to get a hold of me on any one of the social media platforms, you can do that. You can email me. You can call me. It's all there for you. So, and like I said, when the show goes live, hopefully by the middle to end of next week, once I get Fate Goes Hammer done, then there will be a Discord invite link in that. You click on that. If you have Discord on your computer, it will go to your browser, but it will give you an option to click on a button that will open up the app, and then you have the invite for the server. So yeah, and also if you want to join the Discord server and the link doesn't work, by all means get a hold of me wherever you see me, and direct message me and tell me that the link isn't working anymore because it's only good for 7 days, and I will get right back to you as soon as I can, and I will give you a fresh invite link for you to use. So there you go. All right, with all of that out of the way, I've got 3 topics. I've got an arcade review, I've got Are You Experienced, and I've got an on-the-road segment after that to wrap it all up. So let's get right on to it. Arcade review. Okay, arcade review. and this is Funspot. And let's see, yeah, so now that I've gotten a little distance and time away from it, you know, I look at my review and I'm like, yeah, I was a little critical, but I think the place deserves it because yeah, I mean, I've said it a million times and I'm probably going to say it 1,000,001 for this review. So, all right, let's get going. As always, I review an arcade according to 5 criteria: location, selection, ambiance, functionality, and value. Location is fairly straightforward. Where is it? Is it easy to get to? Is there ample parking? Is there signage that you can see from the road? So you know exactly where it is, that kind of stuff. Selection, again, pretty straightforward. How many machines do you have? What kind of cross-section do you have? Does it all, are they all machines from a particular era, I should say, or are they a mix of them? Do they go from the 70s to the 2000s or even the 2010s? Things like that. The number of machines gets higher rating, but also that rating is modified by the cross-section as well. Because I've been known to give an arcade that has maybe like 40 machines, 40 to 50 machines, and, was that a 40 to 50 is what, a 5.5 rating, I think, or 6. And, but I will give them an extra half point to a full point, considering their cross-section is good. I've done it in the past, I'll do it again. Ambiance, again, fairly straightforward. What's there, aside from the video game machines, to, help you with, the proper, give you the proper atmosphere, let's put it that way. Is there video game art of any kind, pictures? Is there music playing? Is that music period correct, so to speak? And things like that. Are the staff friendly and helpful? Are they willing to listen to your problems, or they do not care? Things of that nature. Functionality, pretty straightforward. How do the games look? How do the games work? Do they work well? Do they look like pristine, look in pristine condition, but they don't work correctly, or vice versa? And, so yeah, things of that nature. And finally, value. Okay, what kind of operation do they have? Do they run on quarters or tokens? Do they do the free play option? Do they do credit cards? Things like that. Like a Dave & Buster's, which has a gaming card that you charge up with money and you play games like that. There are several places like that. Places like the arcade in Brighton where I work, that's a free play arcade. Or a free play pinball arcade, which is up in Fraser, which is like northeast of Detroit. They're a free play arcade. Galloping Ghost is free play. Funspot, which I'm going to review, is not. There are various ways to run arcades, and, depending on what it is and what you get for your money determines, where I rate it as far as value goes. Also, are there other things near to or attached to the arcade to give the customer more for their money? Do they have like snacks and drinks? Do they have like a restaurant or a bar, like the Barcade in Detroit, which is a bar arcade? One is the other. They serve food, they serve drinks, they have a full-blown arcade. Great place. But yeah, so it's not just the arcade itself when it comes to value, but it's what's also in the arcade aside from that and what's around it that drives, how high I decide what the value rating should be. So yeah, all these criteria are rated 1 to 10 with half points coming into play, and you add it all up, you divide it out by 5, and you get the total score. So, all right, so without any further ado, let's do this. Okay, location, I give it a 5. Funspot is on the north end of Laconia, New Hampshire, near the western shore of Meredith Bay on Lake Winnipesaukee. It's on US Highway 3 and is about 10 miles east of Interstate 93. It is a little bit of a trek to get to because of that, because of its actual location, but it's also on a major US highway, so I give it average marks in the end. It is a little bit of a haul to get up there. I mean, even if unless you live like, in the immediate vicinity, like if you even live in Concord, which is the state capital, it's still a bit of a haul to get up there. So yeah, I give it average marks because it's on a US highway and it's relatively close to a US interstate. Okay, moving on. Selection, of course, I give it a 10. If I was to go over the maximum rating of 10, I would give Funspot at least a 12. With Galloping Ghost being the quote-unquote gold standard, if I was going to go over a 10, I would give that like a 13 or 14 if I was going to go above 10. The number of machines is in excess of 600, but the cross-section was absolutely stunning. They had machines that represented every decade of arcade gaming going back to the 60s in terms of pinball machines and 70s with the video games. I saw games there that I had not seen since I started playing games when I was 8 years old. So of course I give maximum points, not just for the selection, the sheer number, but also the cross-section. Ambiance, I give it an 8. There are plenty of things to look at aside from the games. The lighting in the main room was a muted orange, which was good in some areas, but not so good in others. There were pictures of the arcade, which showed its history, and machines on display with their history and the like. I did see staff walking the floor every so often, which was also good. Okay, now here we go. Functionality, I give it a 4. The machines that did worked beautifully. There's no doubt about that. I mean, there was oh goodness, now I've forgotten the name of the game, but there was a game that I had not seen a machine of since I went to Galloping Ghost, and before that, not until like the early 80s, if you don't count emulation, of course. But yeah, those games that worked great, that did worked beautifully. Their Star Trek game was absolutely aces. Everything was perfect. That game played wonderfully, and it was an environmental cap too, which was pretty awesome. The Space Fury game that they had was in perfect working condition. But yeah, the problem is the number of machines that were either shut down, not functioning properly, or had monitors that needed recapping or replacing because they were so dim was more than a little disappointing, not to mention that a lot of the major titles, like their Upright Star Wars and Tempest machines, were not working. And that was just all kinds of disappointing. I mean, I was already told about this place by several people before coming up there, for going up there, I should say. But even so, just to see it and to experience it was, even though I kind of knew what I was getting into, but yeah, I was still disappointed. And that's just, there's no sugarcoating that. There's just no way to sugarcoat that. And finally, value, I give it a 9. There are much more than just arcade games there, and that's why I rate it so high. They have an indoor mini golf course, a bowling alley, and a bingo hall right across the parking lot, as well as the arcade. They say they have 650 games, but I think that's a total of all the games. In a move straight out of the early 80s, you could get 25 tokens for $5, 50 for $10, and a whopping 110 tokens for $20. Everything's run off those tokens, so if you spend $20, $40 at the most, you have fun for the entire family. They could have gone like equal, 1/4 equals 1 token, even though they don't do that. You basically have to either insert money or insert a credit card, to get your tokens. But yeah, I mean, but that's like right out of prime video game era, like 1981 to like just 1983, just before the crash, where arcades were giving you 5 tokens for $1, 6 tokens for $1, and and so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean, I give really high marks for value because not only that, there's more than just the arcade there. There's also more for the family. So yeah, I give them a 9 for that. Okay, so you add all of those values together and you just divide it by 5 and you come up with a total score of 6.6. I like the place, but the number of machines that were not up to snuff lets it down, and there's no way to sugarcoat it. It's the exact same issue that I had with Galloping Ghost when I went there in 2021, and my issue is if you are going to put that many machines on display for people to play, the games need to work. Now, I know once you get, I think the number is like, I want to say it's like 200 and up, but the way I look at it, if you're going to put it out there and you're going to have people to come in, you have to have those machines work. I mean, it's a problem that I had with Pinball Pete's, which is a, much smaller arcade. It's just that problem in miniature. It's something that I am grateful for with the arcade in Brighton because we have a tech who knows his stuff and is passionate about it. And, but for the larger arcades, I mean, when I go out to Pastimes, hopefully sometime in I think probably the late summer, if I can get the funds together. As far as Pastimes goes, I've heard nothing but positive things about it. So I'm going to reserve my judgment until I get there and see it with my own eyes and, experience it myself. So we'll see. But I mean, when I went to Galloping Ghost in 2021, it was the same problem. I mean, there were so many machines that were down or not working properly. It took away from the experience. And Funspot is just more of the same when it comes to that. And that's just how it is. If you're going to put an arcade out, the games need to work, bottom line. And the way I see it, that's the main reason why you have an arcade in the first place, unless you're doing it for ego. And that's something that people have told me about certain places, that they're just put out to, pretty much assuage the owner's ego, and I'll just leave it at that. I get that there's a big historical aspect to Funspot, and they rest their laurels on it. As a matter of fact, like I said in Arcade Rundown, they just got, I think they got a federal grant or designation that it's now a museum. But even so, if you're putting it out there for people to play, fix them. Fix your games. I've said it a million times, and I'll say it 1,000,001, 1,000,002. I'll say it till I'm blue in the face, and that's just how it is. So yeah, there's Funspot. As a matter of fact, I remember about a month ago or so, I was talking to people on Facebook, and there are a couple of people who are like, I don't know what you're talking about. When I went there, every game I played worked. And I'm like, well, hopefully they got more people and they fixed their games, because when I went there for almost about 3.5 years ago now, 3 1/3, that wasn't the case. All I can talk about is my experience there, and that experience coincides with a bunch of other people who have been there. I mean, there were Twitch streamers who went there, and I asked them point blank while they were on stream, what did they think and how did they think about it and how are the games? And they basically said it's like a lot of them don't work. And that's just how it is. And it's disappointing, to be sure, but like I told you, when I first started this podcast, I was going to be honest about what I experienced. There is no bias, and everything, it's straight neutral, right down the line from the time I walk in the place. I'm able to be objective, and I think my reviews are the same. And there is no bias, there is no hatred, there is nothing but honesty and the experiences with what I saw with my own eyes and what I experienced with my own hands, and that's how it is. So anyway, all right, that's the review for Funspot. And like I said, if you've been to Funspot more recently and they've turned things around, hey, let me know about it, and I'll do a mea culpa if I have to. arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com. All right, so let's go right on to Are You Experienced?
I'm too old for this. Hiding in front seats like a teenager.
Opie, I think I'm getting too old for this stuff.
I'm getting too old for this.
Listen, you was born too old for this.
I'm getting too old for this. You're getting too old for this. Lying wet-arsed in the heather chasing other men's cattle.
I'm getting too old for this sort of thing.
Maybe we're getting too old for this. What do you think, huh?
I'm not too old for this shit. I'm not too old for this shit. You will not. We're not too old for this shit. We're not too old for this shit. We're not too old for this. Say it like you believe. We're not too old for this shit.
Yeah. We're not too old for this.
I'm not going to buy a hemorrhoid cushion.
We're not too old for this shit.
Are You Experienced? Q*bert. Yeah, this game made quite the impression on me back in the day, but I'll get to that. Just as I've done since the first Are You Experienced that I've done, I use Wikipedia as the source for the information, and I'm doing so now, so let's get right on to it. Q*bert is an arcade video game developed and published for the North American market by Gottlieb in 1982. It is a 2D action game with puzzle elements that uses isometric graphics to create a pseudo 3D effect. The object of each level in the game is to change every cube in a pyramid to a target color by making Q*bert, the on-screen character, hop on top of the cube while avoiding obstacles and enemies. Players use a joystick to control the character. Oh, by the way, the directions are diagonals, all four of them. That's another thing that makes this game unique, but let's continue. The game was conceived by Warren Davis and Jeff Lee. Lee designed the title character and original concept, which was further developed and implemented by Davis. Q*bert was developed under the project name Cubes. Q*bert was well received in arcades and among critics. The game was Gottlieb's most successful video game and is among the most recognized brands from the golden age of arcade games. It has been ported to numerous platforms. The game's success resulted in sequels and the use of the characters' likenesses in merchandising, such as appearances on lunchboxes, toys, and an animated television show. The Q*bert character became known for his, quote, swearing and Q*berty sound, an incoherent phrase made of synthesized speech generated by the sound chip and a speech balloon containing a Growlix that appears when he collides with an enemy. Because the game was developed during the period when Columbia Pictures owned Gottlieb, the intellectual rights to Q*bert remained with Columbia even after they divested themselves of Gottlieb's assets in 1984. Therefore, the rights have been owned by Sony Pictures Entertainment since its parent acquired Columbia in 1989. Q*bert appeared in Disney's Wreck-It Ralph franchise under the license from Sony and later appeared in the film Pixels. Let's move on to the gameplay. Q*bert is an action game with puzzle elements played from an axonometric third-person perspective to convey a three-dimensional look. The game is played using a single diagonally mounted four-way joystick. The player controls Q*bert, who starts the game at the top of the pyramid made of 28 cubes and moves by hopping diagonally from cube to cube. Landing on a cube causes it to change color, and changing every cube to the target color allows the player to progress to the next stage. At the beginning, jumping on every cube once is enough to advance. In later stages, each cube must be hit twice in order to reach the target color. Other times, cubes change color every time Q*bert lands on them, instead of remaining on the target color once they reach it. Both elements are then combined in subsequent stages. Jumping off the pyramid results in the character's death. The player is impeded by several enemies, introduced gradually to the game. Coily. He first appears as a purple egg that bounces to the bottom of the pyramid, then transforms into a snake that chases Q*bert. He is often considered the main antagonist and Q*bert's arch nemesis. Q*bert will die if he collides with Coily. Ugg and Wrongway. The two purple creatures that hop along the sides of the cubes in an Escher-esque manner. Starting in either the bottom left or the bottom right corner, they keep moving towards the top right or top left sides of the pyramid, respectively, and fall off the pyramid when they reach the end. Both are dangerous. Q*bert will also die if he collides with them. Slick and Sam. The two green creatures that descend down the pyramid and revert cubes whose color had already been changed. They do not hurt Q*bert, but are annoying and change the color of the cube to the original or former color, making the pyramid of cubes harder to solve for Q*bert. Contact with the purple enemies results in a life loss, whereas the green ones are removed from the board upon contact. Colored balls occasionally appear at the second row of cubes and bounce downward. Contact with a red floating disc on either side of the pyramid serve as an escape from danger, particularly coyly. When Q*bert jumps on a disc, it transports him to the top of the pyramid. If Coily is in close pursuit of the character, he will jump after Q*bert and fall to his death, awarding bonus points. This causes all enemies and balls on the screen to disappear, though they start to return after a few seconds. Points are awarded for each color change, either 15 or 25 points. Defeating Coily with a flying disc is 500 points. The remaining discs at the end of the stage, at higher stages, 50 points. I think it's 25 points to start, then it goes to 50 or 100. Catching green balls are 100, and catching Slick and Sam are 300 points each. Bonus points are also awarded for completing a screen, starting at 1,000 points on the first screen of level 1 and increasing by 250 on each subsequent completion up to 5,000 after level 4. Extra lives are granted for reaching certain scores, which are set by the machine operator. Okay. Let's do the development. Programmer Warren Davis wrote that he was inspired by a pattern of hexagons implemented by a fellow Gottlieb developer and Mad Planets designer Kan Yabumoto. In a different telling, the initial concept began when artist Jeff Lee drew a pyramid of cubes inspired by M.C. Escher. Lee believed a game could be derived from the artwork and created an orange, armless main character. The character jumped along the cubes and shot projectile called mucus bombs from a tubular nose at enemies. Enemies included a blue creature, later changed purple and named Wrongway, and an orange creature, later changed green and named Sam. Lee had drawn similar characters since childhood, inspired by characters from comics, cartoons, Mad Magazine, and by artist Ed Big Daddy Roth. Q*bert's design later included a speech balloon with a string of nonsensical characters, which Lee originally presented as a joke. Well, that came back, didn't it? Let's see, implementation. Warren Davis, who was hired to work on the game Protector, noticed Lee's ideas and asked if he could use them to practice programming randomness and gravity as game mechanics. Thus, he added balls that bounce from the pyramids top to bottom. Because Davis was still learning how to program game mechanics, he wanted to keep the design simple. He also believed that games with complex control schemes were frustrating and wanted something that could be played with one hand. To accomplish this, Dave removed the shooting and changed the objective to saving the protagonist from danger. As Davis worked on the game one night, Gottlieb's vice president of engineering, Ron Waxman, noticed him and suggested to change the color of the cubes after the game's character has landed on them. Davis implemented a unique control scheme, a 4-way joystick that was rotated 45 degrees to match the directions of Q*bert's jumping. Staff members at Gottlieb urged for a more conventional orientation, but Davis stuck to his decision. Davis remembered to have started programming in April 1982, but the project was only put on the schedule as an actual product several months later. Let's see. We'll skip over the audio. Okay, we'll go to the title, because this is actually kind of amusing to me. The Gottlieb staff had difficulty naming the game. Aside from the project named Cubes, it was untitled for most of the development process. The staff agreed the game should be named after the main character, but disagreed on the name. Lee's title for the initial concept, Snots and Boogers, was rejected, as was a list of suggestions compiled from company employees. See, that's pretty funny to me. Let's see. According to Davis, Vice President of Marketing Howie Rubin championed the nonsensical string characters as the title, although staff members argued it was silly and it would be impossible to pronounce. A few early test models were produced with those characters as the title on the unit's artwork, and I've seen a few of those. You know, I think Gottlieb, I think you could order it. I'm not sure if it was from Gottlieb or from another company, but yeah, you could actually order a marquee with just the character titles on it. Let's see. During a meeting, Hubert was suggested, and a staff member thought of combining cubes and Hubert into Cubert, C-U-B-E-R-T. Art director Richard Tracy changed the name to Cubert, Q-B-E-R-T, and the hyphen was later changed to an asterisk. In retrospect, Davis expressed regret for the asterisk because it prevented the name from becoming a common crossword term, and it is a wild card character for search engines. That's pretty funny. That's funny to me. Let's see. Let's go to the testing. As development neared the production stage, Cubert underwent location tests in local arcades under its preliminary title, which are the characters, before being widely distributed. According to Jeff Lee, his old and written record attesting to the game being playable as the characters in a public location, a Brunswick bowling alley dating back to September 11th, 1982. Gottlieb also conducted focus groups in which the designers observed players through a one-way mirror. The control scheme received a mixed reaction during playtesting. Some players adapted quickly, although others found it frustrating. Initially, Davis was worried players would not adjust to the different controls. Some players would unintentionally jump off the pyramid several times, reaching a game over in about 10 seconds. Wow, that's like close to Defender territory. Let's see. Players, however, became accustomed to the controls after playing several rounds of the game. The different responses to the controls prompted Davis to reduce the game's level of difficulty, a decision that he would later regret. That's pretty funny to me. Okay, the release. Cubert is Gottlieb's fourth video game. A copyright claim registered with the United States Copyright Office by Gottlieb on February 10, 1983, cites the date of publication of Cubert as October 18, 1982. Video Games reported that the game was sold directly to arcade operators at its public showing at the AMOA show held on November 18th through the 20th, 1982. Gottlieb offered the machines for $2,600 per unit. Wow. I'm trying to remember because I think the going rate for a brand new arcade game was anywhere between $3,000 and $4,000. So yeah, that's a pretty low price if my memory serves me correctly. To continue. Cashbox Magazine listed the mass market U.S. release date as December 1982. The game was distributed in Japan by Konami and Sega in March 1983. It was also released in Europe in March of 83. Okay, the reception. Cubert is Gottlieb's only video game that earned considerable critical and commercial success, selling about 25,000 arcade cabinets. In the United States, it was among the 13th highest-grossing arcade games of 1983. Cabaret and cocktail versions of the game were later produced. The machines have since become collector's items. The rarest of them are the cocktail versions. That makes sense. I think I've only seen in my life, I only think I've seen like one Cubert cocktail, and I can't remember where it was. But anyway, to continue. When the game was first introduced to a wider industry audience at the November 82 AMOA show, it was immediately received favorably by the press. Video Games Magazine placed Cubert first in its list of top 10 hits, describing it as, quote, the most unusual and exciting game of the show, end quote, and stating that, quote, no operator dared to walk away without buying at least one, end quote. The Coin Slot reported Gottlieb's game Cubert was one of the stars of the show and predicted that the game should do very well. Contemporaneous reviews were equally enthusiastic and focused upon the uniqueness of the gameplay and audiovisual presentation. Roger C. Sharp of Electronic Games considered it, quote, a potential arcade award winner for Coin-Op Game of the Year, end quote, praising innovative gameplay and outstanding graphics. William Broha of Creative Computing Video and Arcade Games described the game as, quote, an all-around winner that had many strong points. He praised the variety of sound effects and the graphics, calling the colors vibrant. Broha lauded Cubert's inventiveness and appeal, stating that the objective was interesting and unique. Michael Blanchett of Electronic Fun suggested that the game might push Pac-Man out of the spotlight in 1983. Neil Tesser of Video Games also likened Cubert to games released in the early 1980s in Japan, like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong, due to the focus on characters, animation, and storylines, as well as the, quote, absence of violence, end quote. Computer and Video Games magazine praised the game's graphics and colors. Electronic Games awarded Q*bert Most Innovative Coin-Op Game of the Year. Video Games Player called it the funniest game of the year among arcade games in 1983. Q*bert continues to be recognized as a significant part of video game history. Author Stephen Kent and GameSpy's William Cassidy considered Q*bert one of the more memorable games of its time. Author David Ellis echoed similar statements, calling it a classic favorite. OneUp.com's Jeremy Parrish and Kim Wilde of Retro Gamer magazine described the game as difficult yet addictive. Author John Sellers also called Q*bert addictive and praised the sound effects and three-dimensional appearance of the graphics. Cassidy called the game unique and challenging. He attributed the challenge in part to the control scheme. IGM's Jeremy Dunham believed the controls were poorly designed, describing them as unresponsive and a struggle. What was he thinking? But he nonetheless considered the game addictive. Edge magazine attributed the success of the game to the title character. They stated that players could easily relate to Q*bert, particularly because he swore. That's pretty funny. Computer and Video Games, however, considered the swearing a negative, but the character appealing. Cassidy believed the game's appeal lay in the main character. He described Q*bert as cute and having a personality that made him stand out in comparison to other popular video game characters. The authors of High Score referred to Q*bert as ultra-endearing alien hopmeister. That's pretty funny. And the cutest game character of 1982. Okay, let's do the ports. At the 1982 AMOA show, Parker Brothers secured the license to publish home conversions of the Q*bert arcade game. Parker Brothers first published a port for the Atari 2600, and by the end of 1983 also advertised versions for the 5200, Intellivision, ColecoVision, Atari 8-bit computers, VIC-20, TI-99-4A, and Commodore 64. The release of the Commodore 64 version was noted to lag behind the others, but appeared in 1984. Parker Brothers also translated the game into a standalone tabletop electronic game. I remember that. It used a VFD screen and has since become a rare collector's item. Q*bert was also published by Parker Brothers for the Philips Video Pack in Europe, the Sakuda original for the Othello Multivision in Japan. There's a system I haven't heard of. Oh, look at that. Huh, interesting. I'm looking at the SG-1000 right now. Interesting. And by Ultra Games for the NES in North America. The initial home port for the Atari 2600, the most widespread system at the time, was met with mixed reactions. Video Games warned that the buyers of the 2600 version, quote, may find themselves just a little disappointed. They criticized the lack of music, the removal of characters ugh and wrong way, and the system's trouble handling the character sprites at a steady performance. You do realize that 2600 is a 2K system, right? Jeez. How ridiculous. But anyway. Later, Mark Brownstein of the same magazine was more in favor of the game, but still cited the presence of fewer cubes in the game's pyramidal layout and pretty poor control as negatives. Will Richardson of Electronic Games noted a lack of audio-visual qualities and counterintuitive controls, but commented the gameplay, stating that the game, quote, comes much closer to its source of inspiration than a surface evaluation indicates, end quote. Randy Hacker of Electronic Fun with Computers and Games called it a quote-unquote sterling adaptation. Computer and Video Games scored the Atari VCS version 70% in 1989. In 2008, IGN's Levi Buchanan rated it the fourth worst arcade port for the Atari 2600, mostly because of a lack of jumping animations for the enemies, which instead appear instantly on the adjacent cube, making it impossible to know in which direction they are traveling before they land. That's a fair criticism. Entertainment Weekly called Q*bert one of the top 10 games for the Atari 2600 in 2013, saying that the port, quote, lost the cool isometric perspective but none of the addictive gameplay, end quote. Other home versions were well received with some exceptions. Of the ColecoVision version, Electronic Fun with Computers and Video Games noted that Q*bert Aficionados will not be disappointed. Brownstein called it one of the best of the authorized versions. Warren Davis also considered the ColecoVision version the most accurate port of the arcade. Computer and Video Games gave the ColecoVision version a 72% score. Brownstein judged that the Atari 5200 version inferior to that of the ColecoVision because of the imprecision of the 5200 controller, but noted that, quote, it does tend to grow on you, end quote. Well, that's just the 5200 controller. It let the whole system down massively. But anyway, to continue. Video Games identified the Intellivision version as the worst of the available ports, criticizing the system's controller as inadequate for the game. Yeah, I can see that. Antic Magazine's David Duberman called the 8-bit version, or the Atari 8-bit version, quote, one of the finest translations of an arcade game for the home computer format, end quote. And Arthur Leyenberger of Creative Computing listed it as runner-up for Best Arcade Adaptation to the System, praising its faithful graphics, sound, movement, and playability. Softline was more critical, criticizing the Atari's version's controls and lack of swearing. The magazine concluded that, quote, the home computer game doesn't have the sense of style of the one in the arcades. The execution just isn't there, end quote. In 1984, the magazine's readers named the game the 5th worst Atari program of 1983. Computer Games called the Commodore 64 version an absolutely terrific translation that, quote, almost totally duplicates the arcade game, end quote, aside from its lack of synthesized speech. A standalone tabletop was awarded Standalone Game of the Year in Electronic Games. Electronic Gaming Monthly reviewed the NES version in 1989, with 4 critics scoring it 7, 3, 4, and 4 out of 10, respectively. In 2003, a version for Java-based mobile phones was announced by Sony Pictures Mobile. Reviewers generally acknowledged it as a faithful port of the arcade original, but criticized the controls. I can see why. Modojo's Robert Falcon stated that the diagonal controls take time to adapt on a cell phone with traditional directions. Michael French of Pocket Gamer concluded, quote, you can't escape the fact that it doesn't exactly fit on mobile. The graphics certainly do, and the spruced up sound effects are timeless. Really, it's a little too perfect a conversion, end quote. Interesting. Air Gamer criticized the gameplay as monotonous and the difficulty as frustrating. By contrast, Wireless Gaming Review called it, quote, one of the best mobile retro roundup games, end quote. Let's see. On February, try it again, edit. On February 22nd, 2007, Q*bert was released on the PlayStation 3's PlayStation Network. It featured upscaled and filtered graphics, an online leaderboard for players to post high scores, and 6-axis motion controls. The game received a mixed reception. IGN's Jeremy Dunham and GameSpot's Jeff Gerstmann did not enjoy the motion controls and said that the game was a title only for nostalgic players. Eurogamer.net's Richard Ledbetter judged the game's elements, quote, too simplistic and repetitive to make them worthwhile in 2007, end quote. Harsh. In contrast, OneUp.com's Jeremy Parrish considered the title worth purchasing, citing its addictive gameplay. Okay, and let's go to the legacy, and there's quite a bit, actually. Wow, wasn't expecting this much, but we'll power through it. Okay, according to Jeremy Parrish, Q*bert is, quote, one of the higher profile titles of the classic era, end quote. In describing Q*bert's legacy, Jeff Gerstmann of GameSpot referred to the game as, quote, a rare arcade success, end quote. And in 2008, Guinness World Records ranked it behind 16 other arcade games in terms of their technical, creative, and cultural impact. Though successful, the creators of the game did not receive royalties, as Gottlieb had no such program in place at the time. Wow, that's horrible. Davis and Lee nonetheless expressed pride about the games continuing to be remembered fondly. Let's see, market impact. Q*bert became one of the most merchandised arcade games behind Pac-Man, although according to John Sellers, it was not nearly as successful as that franchise or Donkey Kong. The character's likeness appears on various items, including coloring books, sleeping bags, frisbees, board games, wind-up toys, and stuffed animals. In a flyer distributed in 1983, Gottlieb claimed over 125 licensed products. However, the video game crash of 1983 depressed the market, and the game's popularity began to decline by 1984. In the years following its release, Q*bert inspired many other games with similar concepts. The magazines, video games, and computer games both commented on the trend with features about Q*bert-like games in 1984. They listed Mr. Cool by Sierra Online, Frostbite by Activision, Q*bopper by Accelerated Software, Juice by Tronix, Quick Step by Imagic, Flip and Flop and Boing by First Star Software, Pharaoh's Pyramid by Master Control Software, Pogo Joe by Screenplay, Rapid Transit by Starpath, as games which had been inspired by Q*bert. Further titles that have been identified as Q*bert-like games include Qubit by Micromax, Jaybird by Orion Software, and in the UK, Bouncer by Acorn Soft. Hubert by Blobby Computer Games, Pogo by Ocean, Spellbound by Beyond, Vector Hopper by Christoph Tutz, and Hoppy Hop by Josian. Wow. Well, what are you going to do about that? Let's see. Yeah, let's go ahead with it. Other media. In 1983, Q*bert was adapted into an animated cartoon as part of Saturday Supercade on CBS, which features segments based on video game characters from the golden age of arcade games. Saturday Supercade was produced by Ruby Spears Productions, the Q*bert segments between 1983 and 1984. The show is set in the United States 1950 area called... Let's try that again. The show is set in a United States 1950s era town called Q*burg and stars Q*bert as a high school student, altered to include arms, hands, a jacket, and sneakers. He shoots black projectiles from his nose, what he calls Slippy-Doo, to make his enemy slip. Ugh, we know what that is. Characters frequently say puns that add the letter Q to words. Gottlieb released the pinball game Q*bert's Quest in 1983. I've played this game. This game is just a mind trip. It has 2 pairs of flippers in an X formation and uses audio from the arcade game. Gottlieb produced fewer than 900 units, but in Japan, Game Machine listed Q*bert's Quest in their June 1st, 1983 issue as the second most successful flipper unit of the year. Wow. Well, I can kind of understand why. That game is a real test of your pinball skills for sure, especially back then. Q*bert is seen being played in the 1984 film Moscow on the Hudson, starring Robin Williams. The 1993 IBM PC role-playing game Ultima Underworld 2 Labyrinth of Worlds has a segment where the player has to solve a pyramid puzzle as an homage to Q*bert. In the 2009 action-adventure game Ghostbusters, the video game, a Q*bert arcade cabinet can be seen in the Ghostbusters headquarters. Q*bert characters appear in Disney's Wreck-It Ralph franchise. He appears in the 2015 movie Pixels as a supporting character. In 2014, he makes a cameo appearance in the Radio Shack Super Bowl 58 commercial, The 80s Called. The game has been referenced in several animated television series, Family Guy, Futurama, The Simpsons, Robot Chicken, Mad, and South Park. Alright, and finally, well, not finally, got like 2 more things, but we'll do the high scores right now. Okay. On November 28th, 1983, Rob Gerhardt reached a score of 33,273,520 points in a Q*bert marathon. He held it for almost 30 years until George Lutz from Brooklyn, New York, played one game of Q*bert for 84 hours and 48 minutes on February 14th through 18th, 2013 at Richie Knuckles Arcade in Flemington, New Jersey. He scored 37,163,080 points. Dora is self-credited by Guinness World Records as the oldest competitive female gamer. How old is she? She probably passed away. 1984's oldest competitive video gamer at the age of 58. Okay, yeah, she was in King of Kong. Okay, that's cool. She set the tournament record score of 1,112,300 points for Q*bert in 1984 at the age of 58. Her record was surpassed by Drew Goins on June 27, 1987, with a score of 2,222,220 points. That was intentional. Self continually attempted to regain the record until her death in 2006. Let's see. On November 18th, 2012, George Lutz broke the Q*bert Tournament world record live at the Kong Off 2 event at the One Up Arcade and Bar in Denver, Colorado. Lutz scored 3,930,990 points in just under 8 hours, earning 1 million points on his first life, beating self-score using a single life. Wow. Lutz's score was verified by Twin Galaxies. The video ends at a score of 3.7 million points, 1,500,000 points over the previous record. That was intentional. You know. Okay, let's see. All right, updates, remakes, and sequels. Let's see. Believing that the original game was too easy, Davis initiated development for faster, harder, more challenging Q*bert in 1983, which increases the difficulty, introduces Q*bertha, and adds a bonus round. The project was canceled. Davis released the ROM image onto the web in December 1996. I have that ROM. I should play it just to see what's going on. Q*bert's Cubes. Several video game sequels were released over the years, but did not reach the same success as the original. The first, titled Q*bert's Cubes, showed a copyright for 1983 on its title screen, whereas the instruction manual cites a 1984 copyright. It was manufactured by Milestar Electronics and uses the same hardware as the original. The game features Q*bert, but introduces new. The game features Q*bert, but introduces new enemies. Meltniks, Shoebops, and Rat-a-tat-tat. The player navigates the protagonist around a plane of cubes while avoiding enemies. Jumping on a cube causes it to rotate, changing the color of the visible sides of the cube. The goal is to match a line of cubes to a target sample. Later levels required multiple rows to match. Though part of a popular franchise, the game's release was hardly noticed. Parker Brothers showcased home versions of Q*bert's Cubes at the Winter CES in January 1985. Q*bert's Cubes was ported to the ColecoVision and Atari 2600. Versions for the Atari 8-bit computers and the Commodore 64 were referred to in the instructions of the release conversions. The Atari 8-bit version has not yet been found, but games that weren't tracked down a preview of the Commodore 60 version in 2017. Wow, interesting. Yeah, I'm looking at a picture of Q*bert's Cubes. I'm glad I didn't get into that game because yeah, that's a hard one. Let's see. The MSX Q*bert, 1986. Konami, who distributed the original Q*bert to Japanese arcades in '83, produced a different game that kept the title Q*bert, released in Japan and Europe for MSX computers in 1986. The main character is a little dragon, and the mechanics are based on Q*bert's cubes. Each of the 50 stages has a different pattern of cubes. The competitive two-play mode assigns each side a different pattern, and the players score points by either completing their pattern first or pushing the other off the board. Okay, so it's combining Q*bert, Q*bert's Cubes, and Mario Brothers, because you can go cutthroat on it. Let's see. Goodness, I mean, there are a lot of sequels here. Let's see. Q*bert for the Game Boy, developed by Real Time Associates and published by Jaleco. In 1992, this version had 64 boards in different shapes. Q*bert 3 for the Super NES was developed by Real Time Associates and published by NT Vic in 1992. Jeff Lee worked on the graphics. It has similar gameplay to the original, but like the Game Boy game, has larger levels of varying shapes. In addition to enemies from the first game, introduces Frog, Top Hat, and Derby as additional enemies, I suppose. Let's see, there was a remake in 1999, which had 3D graphics. It was developed by Artec Studios and released by Hasbro Interactive on the PlayStation and Microsoft Windows in 1999 and on the Dreamcast in 2000. There was one for Game Boy Color, another version of Q*bert in 2004. Sony released a sequel for Adobe Flash titled Q*bert 2004, containing a faithful rendition of the arcade game along with 50 levels that use new board layouts and 6 new visual themes. Q*bert Deluxe for iOS devices was initially released as a rendition of the arcade game, but later received updates with the themes and stages from Q*bert 2004. And let's see, there was another one, Q*bert 2005. Q*bert rebooted in 2014. Goodness. And another Q*bert release by Lucky Cat Games in 2019. So, and that was for the iOS and Android. Wow. So yeah, a lot of information there. So that's all the information that I'm going to read for Q*bert, so let's move right on to my experiences with it. This game was radically different than almost anything else in 1982, from the characters to the graphics to the gameplay itself. It was weird for sure, but in a good way. Definitely unique. I think Trouble Mall Arcade got it first, then I started seeing it everywhere. If Q*bert didn't have what I call universal coverage, meaning that it was in every arcade I went to back in the day, it was very close. Spanky's, Arnie's Place, Milford Rec, Connecticut Post Mall Arcade, and Video Circus, an arcade in Stratford that I went to only a handful of times in 1982 and 1983, and a couple of stores and game rooms around town as well. I like to think that if a unique game is done well, it immediately fills a niche, and Q*bert is certainly one of those games. It's cute, it's fun, it gets very challenging in short order. I think I got as far as level 5 when I was dedicating time and money to the game, and that's when things really start getting hectic. I honestly believe this game more or less kind of saved Gottlieb in a way, and because they were more known for pinball machines than video games, even though they made 3 other video games before this one and a couple after. This also led them to create some very interesting and memorable pinball machines and video games moving forward. And that's my thoughts on Q*bert. Information and, of course, my experiences. If you have any more info with about Q*bert, or you have you own a Q*bert machine, or whatever you've got, let me hear it. arcadeaddictsbrian@gmail.com. All right, and finally, we're going to go on the road. This little segment was recorded February 6th of 2022, almost 3 years ago to the day. And I think I was talking about when I started getting back into playing Robotron, like for real. So I think this is after I left work at the arcade. So yeah, I mean, I can't remember exactly because it's been so long, almost, like I said, almost 3 years. So you want to know what? Let me just hit play and we'll find out together. Once again, if you, like I said, we are on Discord, and we welcome your discussion and input as long as you're civil. And like I said, when this episode gets released, there will be an invite link in the show description. And if you encounter this episode and the link does not work, get a hold of me wherever you can. So I have various social media outlets. Just direct message me and tell me that you need an invite to the Discord server, and I'll send you one. So until then, I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Have fun out there. Good gaming. Au revoir. Hey folks, Brian here, and this is On the Road. Time check, 7:04 p.m. Sunday, the 6th or 7th, yeah, the 6th of February, 2022. I am on my way to the store after going to Pinball Pete's. Full disclosure, this is the morning or the day after I posted episode 50. I went to visit a friend in the hospital who's having a really tough time. She got COVID, and she's been in the hospital basically for 2 months, since like the 10th of December. So she's having a rough time of it right now. I mean, she's a lot better than she was, but she's still having a rough go. After I did that visit, I said, you know what, I need to freaking decompress a little bit because, well, my son got into something he wasn't supposed to, and he got in trouble for it, and, you know, that was how my mindset when I left my apartment. And then after I finished the visit, and I said, you know what, I'm going to Pinball Pete's. I'm going to spend a couple dollars to play a couple games of Robotron and, you know, sort of de-stress a little bit. So, you know, after getting a $20 bill at the ATM at the hospital, I drove right over to the parking garage. Thankfully, parking is free on Sundays in downtown Ann Arbor. And went to Pinball Pete's and, you know, broke the 20, got change, and, you know, marched through the arcade, went upstairs, and went to Williams Row, as I like to call it. And there's a guy standing there playing Robotron. I'm like, and I took a look at the screen, and he's got over 1 million points, and I'm like, oh, this is going to take a minute. So I, you know, just stood back and watched him, and he's pretty good. He's pretty good. And, you know, he looks over at me after he finishes a stage. He's like, Brian? I'm like, yeah, that's me. And he called me by my full name, and I'm like, yeah, that's me. He's like, and I recognized him. I said, Bill, is that you? And he's like, yeah. Long story short, Bill is somebody who I talked to on Facebook. And he, you know, was telling me, you know, someone brought up a topic of Robotron in the Robotron group that we're in. And he, you know, and he asked me about something. I replied, I said something about Pinball Pete's, and he's like, well, I go to Pinball Pete's all the time. And I'm like, oh, really? And he's like, yeah. And we struck up a little bit of a conversation. And I said, well, if my schedule ever allows me to do it, I'll meet you at Pinball Pete's. We can, you know, play some Robotron and stuff like that. And that's where it was. I think that we had that conversation like in, I want to say like late November, early December, somewhere in there. And so I decide today to go to Pinball Pete's, and there he was, and we're like, hey, what's up? And, you know, struck up a nice conversation, and it was really good. You know, Bill's a cool guy. You know, really good at Robotron. And his play style is different than mine. But I can't argue with his results. I really can't. So, what else? So yeah, so I end up playing a bunch of games of Robotron. He stood and watched. You know, we complimented each other on our game playing styles and stuff like that. And, you know, then we decided to play a game of doubles. And, you know, I was having difficulty because the fire control to the left was intermittent. And that was very frustrating, to say the least. So yeah, I basically, the highest score I got was like 570 or something like that. And, you know, he's like very complimentary of my gaming style, or, you know, my play style of Robotron. And, you know, we're sort of encouraging each other. I played like 6 games in a row. I didn't get anything past like 570. what else? And then we played the game of doubles, and I only got like 420,000 because there were certain situations in the game where I needed to fire left, and it just would not. The game would not cooperate, and it was getting more than a little bit frustrating, to say the least. Because like I said, Robotron is a hard enough game with a fully functioning machine, but, if the game is not working correctly, it's like playing the game with a hand tied behind your back. So I could only manage like 571,000, and and he's playing, and he's been, quite honestly, he's better than me. So by the time my game ended, he had gotten over 1 million points, or about 900,000 points, and he suggested that we alternate lives for the rest of the game, and that's what we did. And we ended up getting like close to 1.2 million, which wasn't bad. It was fun. It's nice to know that later in the game that a lot of the strategies I use for it work. So, it was fun. And after we finished that, I'd used up all my quarters. So, we basically shook hands and said goodbye, and I got in my car and, got on the road and decided to make this recording. So, let me pay for my groceries. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So, yeah, that was a pretty cool experience. It's always good to meet a fellow gamer. And it's always good to sort of just have fun and, play a game that you're both familiar with and sort of give each other pointers and, the things you've seen playing the game and so forth and so on. When I left the arcade, when I closed the arcade last night, I decided to play a couple of games before I shut everything down and got out of there for the night. So I played a game of Robotron, and I got, 707? Or 770, I'm sorry, 770,000. And the problem is that, come on girls, walk a little faster, please. That's the problem about being in a college town. It's like anybody under the age of 25 thinks the world revolves around them, and the world should wait on them. Sorry, got on a little rant there. So yeah, I got like 779,000 or something like that, which is above average. Average for me now is like 500,000 now. I mean, I'm still trying to break 1 million on an actual Robotron cabinet, but, considering that, and I talked to Bill about this while we were playing, is that, I got like, 2.4 million on Williams Arcade Classics, for the PlayStation 1, and, but that was also because I messed with the difficulty settings and got like a free guy every 10,000 points and stuff like that, and that's how I used to play to sort of practice for when I would go to the arcade and actually play the machine. So that was pretty cool, because I intended on playing a couple of games of Bride of Pinbot and then play a couple games of Robotron before, I got out of there for the night. But yeah, as it turns out, I played one good game of Robotron and I was happy. And then, got in my car and, went home for the night. Man, the arcade last night was jumping. I mean, we had, what was the final count? Like 190 people, come in and out of there today. And pretty much it was split between my coworker Thaddeus's shift and my shift. It was like 95 or close to 100 for him, and then the balance was mine. And, it was cool. I mean, it's nice to know people are starting to come out a little more, especially when they find out about the arcade. That's a big, big thing. I pimp the arcade whenever I can. You guys have heard it, and that was even before I got a job there. I was pimping it. I still think it's the best arcade in Michigan, but there's some up and coming places like Retro Electric that are going to challenge for that title pretty soon. I mean, the only thing holding Retro Electric back is the number of machines. That's it, And like I said, I talked to the owner, Carl, and his future plans is to get a bigger building. I mean, I was there, 4 weeks ago? And, I was in there and, it was pretty busy. There were a lot of people in there. And thankfully, Carl had the foresight to put, gaming tables, where you can play, like Risk or Monopoly, all the, Connect 4, all the classic board games that we all grew up with. And, and then you have, the little, like I said, the little family setup, the family TV setup, which was awesome, But, that place is on the come up. And he's only been open less than 2 months. So, yeah, he's doing it right over there. I give him props wherever I can, because he deserves it. I'm like, he's already got the games, he's got the games, and now he's got the atmosphere right. Because that is like, as soon as you walk in that place, it's like walking into one of those arcades that I used to go to when I was in my, preteen and teenage years, So, yeah, I mean, that's awesome. But yeah, it was a busy night at, the arcade in Brighton, and that's what I love to see. You had everybody having fun. You had people of all ages having fun in there, playing games. All the kids are running around having fun. The adults are, the ones who decide to play games along with their kids are having fun. There was this one dude who had his daughters with him, and he was there from when I clocked in, before I clocked in, until closing time. I mean, I walk over, he's playing the Transformers sit-down co-op game, and it's already like 2 minutes to 11 o'clock, and I'm like, I go over and I said, sir, we're closing, and he's poked his head out. He said, what'd you say? I said, we're closing. He's like, what time is it? I said, it's almost 11. He's like, it's 10 o'clock. I said, no, it's 11. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah. It was kind of funny. So, but I understand about that place. And I told him that when he was leaving. He's like, because he couldn't believe, sorry about that, my son's school is calling with the automated message from the principal. They've already called our house and called my girlfriend's cell phone, so, I don't need to listen to it. And not only that, they send us emails too, so I'll read the email and see what's going on there. But yeah, I mean, it was funny because, yeah, he completely lost track of time. And I said, dude, I've been there. I told him I've been going to arcades since I was literally like 9 years old. And I know all about going in there and thinking you're going to only spend a couple of hours and a few dollars in there, and then the next thing you know, it's 5 or 6 hours later and you're completely out of money. Yeah, I've told the stories, folks. You've heard it. But anyway, I'm going to cut this short little on-the-road segment short. I just got home, and now My son and I have to clean up the mess he made, and hopefully this is a learning experience for him, because, yeah, I'm going to have to change how things are in regard to him and his free time, and so forth and so on, because, yeah, I was not a happy camper when I left, and I will leave it at that. So, until next time, this is Brian saying, have fun out there, good gaming, au revoir.
You have been listening to the Confessions of an Arcade Addict podcast. All music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find his music at incompetech.com. You can also contact the show by email at arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com, or you can contact the show by voicemail at area code 734-623-0832. All links to social media are on Linktree. That is linktr.ee/arcadeaddictbrian. So until next time, you have been listening to the Confessions of an Arcade Addict podcast. See you then. This podcast has been brought to you by Gamer Nation Productions. By gamers, for gamers. Roll with us.